Hello and welcome to Canon Fodder Podcast, episode 4.
Episode 4.
Episode 4.
Okay.
I am Kyle Newcomb.
I am Travis Knight.
And today we are covering Star Wars The Force Unleashed. The book is Star Wars The Force Unleashed by Sean Williams, based on a story by Hayden Blackman.
Neither of which author I have ever read before.
Neither have I. But I don't read near as much as you do.
Yeah, I've read Star Wars books, but I've never read a Sean Williams book, so I don't...
We forgot to look up to see if this is actual canon after Disney took over.
It is not, because on my copy of the book it says Legends, and the Legends means that it's the old expanded universe stuff, so it's all been stripped out.
Okay.
For better or worse, I suppose.
All right.
So it was canon for a little while, right?
Yeah. As far as I know, it was canon, and then Disney took over and stripped out a bunch of the canon.
Yeah, but the books are being sold with the Legends now, which means it's no longer part of the Star Wars canon for realsies.
That's unfortunate. Sort of, kind of, a little bit. You and I are both huge Star Wars fans.
Yes.
Big Star Wars fans. Me more in more recent years.
I grew up with it.
I actually found out why I wasn't a Star Wars fan growing up.
Star Trek?
No, my dad doesn't like them.
Oh.
He's never actually watched any of the movies.
Really?
Yeah.
How does he know he doesn't like him then?
I don't know.
He's not that big. We could probably just belt him to a chair and force him on him.
Probably. So I never grew up with Star Wars. I discovered them while I was in the military.
Huh. My dad loves Star Wars and Star Trek alike, so I grew up with both of those.
I grew up with Star Trek: The Next Generation. That was my sci-fi experience.
Huh.
Yeah, in recent years I've become a huge Star Wars fan. You and I have gone to see all the new Star Wars movies that have come out in the theaters, and it's one of those, ooh, a new one's out. Let's go.
Yep. I'm looking forward to The Last Jedi, too. Is starting to sound really cool. Sounds kind of like a remake of Empire Strikes Back, but I won't complain.
No, Empire was really good.
Yeah. So this book was set before the trilogy, before it got stripped of its canon. So it comes before A New Hope.
Yes.
Just like Rogue One.
Yes, and comes even before Rogue One. Because this is the setup of the actual rebellion.
Yeah, that's true. So this would actually come right before Rogue One, because Mon Mothma and Bail Organa are both parts of the Rebel Alliance. They will show up in the movie, and you see the Death Star being completed in Rogue One.
It's still constructed in Rogue One.
Yeah.
It's still like halfway constructed.
Because you see the dish being settled.
No.
In Rogue One, they're settling the dish in the background.
Oh, in Rogue One, yes.
In this, they're testing the lasers, but they don't actually fire it. So this has got to be set a few years or maybe a few months before Rogue One, if it was still canon.
Yep. So I guess I'll start with the game. My biggest complaint with this one was...
Oh, what system did we should talk about the context in which we played it, because I think that determines our opinion to a very large extent with this game.
I would agree with that. We both played on PC.
Yeah. Did you play with controller or keyboard?
Keyboard.
Keyboard, me too.
Because I could not get my controller to work with it.
Okay. Yet the game is very obviously built for a controller.
Oh, absolutely.
And the port, it's the PC game is definitely a port of the console versions.
I actually looked it up. The console versions came out September of 2008, and the PC version released in November of 2009.
Okay, so there was a year-long difference in which they managed to make the game substantially worse.
Yes.
Because it is a garbage PC port.
Yes, I have actually played this in the past on console, and I do remember playing it, and it was semi-enjoyable.
Yeah, I remember playing it on the 360 in college, or maybe really late high school. It would have been college. September of 2008. I would have been at OCC. I remember playing it, but I didn't beat it. I liked it a lot, but for whatever reason, I didn't stick with it long enough to beat the game.
I don't actually remember beating the game. I know that it has I do know that it has multiple endings depending on your difficulty level.
Yeah, there's like the legendary ending. Jen
looked up reviews while I was reading the book, and she said, because I was curious if there were differences between the game and the book. There are a few, but the biggest complaint about the book was that it only had one ending.
Yep. Well, because the legendary ending determines the entire sequel for the game. The sequel is predicated on the legendary ending of the game itself.
Gotcha.
And we're going to get to why when we discuss both the game and the book. But the biggest thing to know from the outset is that the book isn't much more than the game.
Yeah, it's an out-and-out plot summary of the game, except for a few key parts.
Yeah, a couple expansions. And unlike almost every other book I think we've done, this one is not a prequel or an expansion or a sequel to the game. You know, Borderlands was kind of a sequel to the first game, but it was set before the second one.
Yep.
and I'm drawing a blank on the others at the moment.
Dead Space was a prequel.
Dead Space was a prequel.
And
Mass Effect Andromeda was a prequel.
And those are the only ones we've done.
Okay, so it's episode 4. When we do Halo Reach, The Fall of Reach, that's a prequel, mostly. And then when we do Elite Dangerous, that's a straight-up expansion.
Yep.
So this one occupies a unique space because it is just a book version of the game in the way that you get a novelization of a movie.
Essentially, the Flood from the Halo series.
Yeah, and that we're probably going to skip that one, I think. Although I guess it'll be up to you. If you want us to do the Flood and discuss the differences between books and games, like shoot us a comment on Twitter or something.
Yep.
Because as we wind down on the production for this first season, we're going to be hoping that you let us know what you'd like us to read and discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe if we get enough, we can do more than 6 episodes a season. We might be able to get
7 or 8.
7 or 8, yeah. And then our extra for the mid.
Looking forward to Ready Player One.
So am I. It's on my Kindle, and I keep looking at it and going, I really want to read this, but I know we can't do it until we get all this stuff done.
Yeah, there's been a surprising amount of hate about the trailer and the movie and even the book. Like, people are just down on it, and
I don't know. I'm looking forward to the movie too.
The internet is such a swirling morass of discontent and anger. Like, let it go. It's a video game book. It's fun. So, Force Unleashed is a plot summary.
Yeah.
So, we're going to try and cut down on redundancies as we go.
Yep.
Kyle's going to do his normal thing. He walks us through the game. I'm going to walk us through the book. And then we're going to decide whether or not we think that this is a meaningful expansion on the book or game, because that's what the podcast is about. Discerning whether or not these tie-in novels that they overcharge us for are actually worth the price of admission. Do they meaningfully expand your experience as a gamer? Speaking
of overcharging, before we really get into the game, I was going to do hard copies for all the books.
Yeah.
So that we could, maybe figure out a way to do a giveaway or something like that for a fan. However, the Elite Dangerous Legacy book that we're doing next, $84 for the hard copy.
Not worth the investment.
No. We will still probably do a giveaway for the books that we do have that aren't $85. But unfortunately, Elite Dangerous Legacy is just not going to be included.
No. The Kindle edition is way cheaper.
Yeah, $7.99. To the game. Star Wars Force Unleashed. The game opens with the signature Star Wars scrolling text. Thank you for the musical interlude. Saying that Vader has been dispatched to the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk to hunt down one of the few remaining Jedi Knights. Play as Vader for the first level. You fight through a bunch of Wookiees, and Vader kills the Jedi and finds the Jedi's son, who he senses to be powerful with the Force, and turns him into his secret apprentice.
Yep.
Because Vader is the Emperor's apprentice, and the Emperor does not want Vader to have an apprentice.
Yep. We get into the rule of 2 with a Sith. The rule of 2 says that there can only really ever be 2 Sith, because they constantly betray each other. The Master is always seeking to dominate the apprentice, and the apprentice, or slave, if you want to look at it like this, is always seeking to overthrow. So that dynamic pushes the Sith forward, whereas the Jedi have this big monastic order. It's one of the fundamental differences between the two forces. And also, it's important to note that while the movies and the books often don't really ever get into the rule of 2 thing, in recent years the Marvel Comics have really doubled down on examining that rule of 2, with the way that Vader interacts with his underlings almost. He's constantly trying to overthrow the Emperor, which is just not a dimension that, like, as a Star Wars fan, I didn't run into that very often. He was always uncomfortable, and they tried to make him relatable. But Marvel has really taken the same tack the Force Unleashed did, where the Emperor is a scheming webmaster, and so is Vader. And so the new comics really follow that track of look at all the apprentices that they do have and the ones that fail, and it makes for a really interesting character dynamic.
I haven't read any of the comics.
I have them if you want to borrow. They're awesome.
I might.
The Vader comic run 1 through 25 before they ended it was awesome all the way through. They just restarted it, and it's Vader right after Mustafar. So he doesn't even have his own lightsaber yet. So the very first mission he's sent on is in order to get a lightsaber, he has to go kill a Jedi, and he takes that Jedi's lightsaber, and that one he will eventually make bleed, and that's how it turns red. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Interesting. All right. You're introduced to the Secret Apprentice as an adult, and Vader gives him a mission to kill General Ram Koda of the Jedi Order. This is his first real test of his powers. You meet Juno, who is the new pilot for the Rogue Shadow. She was recruited from the Black 8.
Which, there's a difference between the book and the game here. I noticed because I went back and watched all the cutscenes yesterday as I was winding this down. In the game, they referred to them as the Black 5.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I picked it up. I was like, wait, really? And I looked back in the book, and there's Black 8. So
I didn't actually catch that.
Very slight difference.
Okay. They set out for Nar Shaddaa.
Nar Shaddaa, yeah. Another place that they've really explored in the comic books. But Nar Shaddaa is the smuggler's moon. And so, think of where Han Solo and Lando would be the most comfortable. But also Dash Rendar and the Hutts and Boba Fett, and it's their kind of place.
Koda has set a trap for the apprentice aboard...
Well, not for the apprentice.
Well,
Vader.
He's set a trap.
Yeah.
He assumes Vader is coming after him.
Yeah, because at this point, the apprentice is on complete lockdown, right? Nobody knows
he exists. Before Vader sends him on this mission, he says that there can be no witnesses at all. Imperial and Rebel alike.
Yeah.
So Koda sets the trap aboard a space station. I believe it was a TIE fighter assembly.
Yeah, it's TIE fighter assembly orbital station.
Okay.
Which is cool because it looks like the Death Star, the interior, so you're automatically familiar with the layout and the graphics and the aesthetic. It helps you get it into the game real quick.
Yeah. So you meet Koda in the control center of the space station. You and Koda duel. He's disappointed that Vader didn't show up. As they're dueling, Koda says that Vader won't always be the apprentice's master. Koda gets a sense of the future and sees himself in the apprentice's future.
Yep.
The apprentice has is this explained in the game?
Mm-mm.
No.
All you see is he goes, "I sense me," and then the apprentice hits him in the eyes with his lightsaber.
Okay.
And blinds
so
him.
we'll talk about that when we get to the book.
There's a difference here.
The apprentice returns to Vader, and Vader sends him after another Jedi and says that he is more powerful than the apprentice, and if the apprentice kills Karsdan Paratus, that he will be one step closer to his destiny. The apprentice thinks his destiny is to overthrow the Empire, the Emperor, with Vader.
Yep, to rule the galaxy together, just like Vader and Luke. Almost the same terminology.
Almost, yeah. I got a very distinct Luke Skywalker and Vader vibe.
Father-son vibe, yeah.
Yeah. Have we got his name yet?
No.
We have not gotten
does not come up in the game as far as I know. I don't remember it being mentioned in the cutscenes at all.
Okay. Well, his name is Starkiller. That's his code name.
Yeah, we do get that from Juno. They do say the code name, but his actual name is reserved for the book.
Okay. That's what I was talking about. His handle.
Gotcha. Yeah. His agent name is Starkiller.
I'm kind of fed up with doing Apprentice. The Apprentice. Because
that's what they refer to in the book forever.
Yeah, my notes say Starkiller.
Mine says SK. I got sick of writing their names, I just abbreviated everything down.
So do I. I do the first letter in a circle. That's how I know where the names are.
Okay, yeah. So he's Starkiller. We're going to refer to him as Starkiller for the duration because he's not always Vader's apprentice throughout the game or the book, and he's not even always a Sith. He at some point becomes more of a gray Jedi. So I'll get into that terminology when we discuss the book because it's more pertinent there. The game does very little to expand except on what the exact circumstance is.
Of the exact circumstance of the game. Starkiller and Juno find a Jedi temple made from junk. Now, I cannot remember the name of this planet.
This planet is called Raxus Prime.
Raxus Prime, that's right.
The junkyard planet.
Quite literally.
Yeah. Or, as I like to call it, Detroit. Goodbye, Michigan fans.
Starkiller kills Karsdan Paratus, which...
I hated this fight.
I didn't have an issue with this fight.
Can we take a moment, because you're doing the game, can we discuss the mechanics and how the boss fights differ from gameplay? Okay, because this is your sphere here, but this made me so mad.
Yes, I was annoyed with the way that the boss fights are because throughout the game you're in a third-person view.
Like over-the-shoulder, traditional, adventure RPG.
Yep, Gears of War style.
Yeah, Gears of War style.
But for the boss fights, the camera is fixed.
Yep.
And that annoyed me to no end.
And you have no control. It's not even fixed, too, because it, like, wanders around sometimes to zoom in on you and zoom out on you, almost like a fighting game.
Actually, Jen was watching me play last night while I was finishing the game up, and during the Vader fight, she was like, this almost looks like a fighting game.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah.
And the way that it zooms in and out with just a little bit of delay, too, it's like a drunken version of the Super Smash Bros. Auto camera. So, because it's never where you want it to be, and because we played it on the keyboard and the mouse is primarily used for swinging your saber and for blocking, and then your WASD keys are used for maneuvering. So all of a sudden, to be janked into this bizarre, uncontrollable isometric view and still have to block and move around, but only having your 4 degrees of movement.
Yeah.
Really. It was really tough. So I had a huge issue with the boss fights. And Kyle was smarter than me. He actually changed the controls.
Well, I started the game after you did.
Because I played it a month in advance. I knew I had to get the game out of the way because I was going to suffer for it.
You complained about the controls to me. So before I even started the game.
I believe the right word is I sobbed about the controls to you.
All right. I was going to give you the benefit of the doubt.
I was a child about it.
And leave your manhood intact.
I was a child about it.
So before I booted up the game, I went in and I changed the controls so that they were a little more fluid. It didn't really help much.
No.
Your biggest complaint was the lock, the target lock.
Yeah, you need to use the target lock to catch stuff.
I never used it.
Huh.
I just kind of dodged out of the way.
I wonder if this is an issue, too, where I'm a left-handed person, so I'm using the mouse in my right hand, so I don't have the same kind of reflexes that you might have as a right-handed person using the mouse.
Maybe.
I'm really good at moving in 4 directions with my left hand. I'm terrible using the mouse for the other stuff.
Well, that's what happens when you leave the idiot in control.
Yeah.
The idiot, by the way, is what him and I refer to our non-dominant hands as.
The idiot.
The idiot. So you kill Karzdan Paratus. Big droids really pissed me off.
The Guardians is what they were called.
The big monster ones, because there were 2 of them in my fight with Karzdan. I don't know how many you ran into.
It took me so long to beat him because I kept force throwing him because he was, if you caught him at the right time, you could force throw him. My issue is he would fly out of the world. I had this issue with a lot of bosses. Anybody who you had to hoist with the force and toss, they more often than not would fall through the map or they'd fall off the edge of the fight, and they're supposed to spring back up, and that instigates the next tier of the boss phase. But instead, they would just not come back. So I fought so many of those things. The Ram Koda fight was probably the least broken of all the bosses, but I would say, like, overall, the bosses were generally just almost unusably broken for me. And Kazdan, I don't know, I fought a few of them. The game is so predicated on QuickTime events, too.
Yeah, that fighting really those things bothered me.
It's just a slog, because it's not fun gameplay. It's click, 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 and then really rapidly you have to stare at the screen, especially on the keyboard and mouse, because it's so poorly arrayed. And then you got to figure out what you're clicking. So the game is a QuickTime event game, which means that they're doing something really cool on screen that you can't do in your normal gameplay, right? But instead you're like, okay, I got to find Q and E, now I got to figure out which one's space and right click, and you miss the cinematic aspect of the game.
Yep. Until you get that QuickTime event memorized, because it never changes for...
And then it does all of a sudden, and then you get kicked back 5 minutes of gameplay.
Yeah. You use Proxy to...
Proxy's in one of your NPCs. He's a holographic droid that trades and tries to kill you. So that you're a better Sith or whatever.
That's his primary programming.
Yeah.
Is to kill you. You use Proxy to communicate with Vader, and Vader sends you to kill Shakti. Shakti is on Felucia. So you get a cutscene with Shakti, who sends Morris Brood into the graveyard.
Her apprentice.
Her apprentice. To wait for her. And says Maris isn't corrupted, just afraid.
Dude, Maris looks like she just walked out of a goth metal concert.
Yes, she does.
She's totally a Sith.
Oh, yeah. So you fight through Fallujah, and you get to the Shakti fight, which that one annoyed me.
That was not fun. That was, after Ram Koda, that was the one that I didn't die on it at all. I just went right through it, but it was just a slugfest.
Yeah, the part that really annoyed me was going into the Sarlacc pit, and then the tentacles just...
There's something to note, too, like Kyle's cutting right across the actual descriptions of the terrain and the general milieu, because the game spends so little time developing the character of the levels that you're on that I didn't realize they were in a Sarlacc pit. It never even connected.
The only reason I knew was because by this point I had read farther in the book than I had in the game. I
just assumed it was some sort of fungus hole with like tentacles. I had no idea they're fighting in a Sarlacc pit.
Yeah, it's a Sarlacc pit.
I don't even think I made the connection to the Jedi Temple because I was just so mentally fatigued by how frustrating the gameplay was that I skipped a lot of the cutscenes without even like I was watching, but nothing was connecting because I was just steaming mad over the controls.
So you fight Shaak Ti, who says that Starkiller's power is wasted, and Starkiller responds with, "You'll never convince me to betray my master," and Shaak Ti retorts back with, "The Sith always betray one another, but you'll learn that soon enough." A little foreshadowing
which
there.
is actually on the back of the book.
It is.
That's the headliner on the blurb. Also, she does mention the fact that like the Force is not a binary thing here, and that starts to instigate the change from a wannabe Sith into something more like a Grey Jedi. So this is kind of a turning point for Starkiller.
Yep.
And you can even see it too, because when he kills Ram Koda, he doesn't care, just dumps him out or doesn't kill him, but he throws him out the window or whatever. And when he kills Kazdan Paratus, there's no remorse, but when Shaak Ti falls backwards, he almost reaches for her.
Yeah.
So there's a character turn
you can see kind of the character development a little bit there.
What did you think about I mean, this game is almost 10 years old at this point.
It is 10 years old.
It is 10 years. Okay.
No,
very close.
It's 9 years old at this point.
Yeah. What did you think about the quality of the cutscenes?
I thought they were pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, for being a 9-year-old game and coming out early on the 360, they were a little janky at points, but overall they were pretty decent.
Yeah. It was a little blurry. Like, what is the video game technology called where everything looks really bright?
I couldn't tell you.
Is it Bloom?
Maybe.
Bloom, like in Fable. Like everything looked really bloomy sometimes. I think it's Bloom. Everything's like really bright and the colors are really
shiny.
Vibrant. Yeah, everything's is a little too shiny, but it still looks dirty, Star Wars style.
Yeah.
You know, I like the cutscenes a lot. I thought they did a good job, but I've been surprised with almost every game.
Yeah, I know.
Except Mass Effect, where I was disappointed.
Yes.
Dead Space's cutscenes were gorgeous.
All the games we played have been 5 to 10 years old.
Yeah, except Mass Effect Andromeda.
Except Andromeda. We won't rehash that one. Go listen to the Andromeda episode and you'll understand if you haven't already listened to it.
Yeah. It's a pretty game. It's just a shame that they took so little time to develop the character of the levels.
Yep. After the battle with Shaak Ti, you meet up with Vader, but the Emperor's fleet follows you back to Vader. Vader says that the Emperor's spies followed him there, and the Emperor makes Vader kill Starkiller.
Surprise!
Yay!
The Sith always kill each other.
Vader salvages Starkiller's body because he throws him out of viewport to rebuild him so he can get his revenge. And says that the Emperor's spies need a distraction and to build a rebellion so that they can overthrow him. So that Vader and Starkiller can overthrow him, not the rebellion. Juno has been branded a traitor to the Empire.
And so far, we've only mentioned Juno twice. It's because she doesn't really matter in the game.
No, she doesn't.
She's
got a much bigger presence in the book.
I think that's to the game's detriment because she's not a bad character by any means.
No, not
she's
at all.
just completely underused.
Absolutely. Juno is locked up on the same ship that Starkiller's on, being rebuilt.
I thought why they would do this for a little while. I was trying to figure out why on earth he wouldn't just send her to a prison planet, but I guess because she's part of his experimental apprentice program, he wouldn't want her to spill the beans.
Yeah.
Or because Vader's also a spy master, he knew what Starkiller was going to do, and he didn't want to have to find another pilot for him.
Could be.
It's another way to like twist his emotions.
Yeah. You rescue Juno, and you leave Vader's ship, which Proxy has set to go into the sun.
Yes. Proxy wastes no time.
Yeah, so that there are no witnesses.
Again.
You go after Ram Koda.
Who is not actually dead.
Nope, just blind.
He's the Jedi Master that you blinded. So they have no direction. They've been dumped out on their own basically and said, go start a rebellion. And this is the only Jedi that he didn't confirm kill. Because for some reason all the Jedi explode in this game when they die.
I didn't notice that.
They'll blah out of their chest.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, and that's actually what kills the Sarlacc is when Shaak Ti explodes.
Oh, alright. Yeah. No, the Sarlacc isn't dead.
It's dead.
No, it's not.
It's dying in the book and it's dead in the game.
Oh, alright.
Yeah.
But anyway.
When we take our break, I'll show you the cutscene where Shaak Ti's chest explodes. Well, not her chest, but you see the beam of light and Kazdan Paratus vomits energy into the sun. Ram Koda, though, we didn't see him explode, so he's probably still alive.
Starkiller goes after Koda because of the premonition that Koda had during their fight, saying that he was part of Starkiller's future, destiny, whatever you want to call it.
Boy, yeah.
So then you go to Kashyyyk because Koda contacts someone from the Senate.
Which can only be one senator from the entire galaxy because Star Wars has its own Star Wars effect where everybody knows each other.
Yep.
And there's only like 50 people.
Yeah. The senator turns out to be Bail Organa, Princess Leia's
adopted father.
At this point, she still thinks he's her father.
I will credit the book in the game, though. This is the very first time I ever learned why she's called Princess Leia. I never understood why she was princess, because there was never a king. He is the Prince of
Alderaan.
Never made that connection before.
So you find Leia on Kashyyyk, and you destroy the Skyhook, which another difference between the game and the book is right here. How Starkiller destroys the Skyhook in the book is vastly different than how it's done in the game.
It's also, the nature of the Skyhook is different, because it's much more of a solid construction, like a space elevator in the book, but in the game it's just like a big tractor beam.
Yeah, it's big giant beam of light.
Yeah, which they were using. Did they explain in the game they were using it to ferry the Wookiee slaves into orbit, or was it just go here, destroy this?
Go here, destroy this. Okay. As far as I caught, you find out that Senator Organa has gone after Shaak Ti so that she can rescue Leia from Kashyyyk. So now you're going back to Fallujah again. Yeah, that annoyed me too. That there were only
There's only 4 planets.
You rescue the Senator and let Marin Brood live after killing a bull Rancor, which the death scene in the book was far more impressive.
Yes, it was. Don't be alarmed at my presence.
You then go back to Raxus Prime.
Back to the garbage planet.
To destroy a Star Destroyer construction base. This was another huge difference between the book and the game. I thought the book did this part much better.
It did. I was actually kind of surprised, though, how similar the cutscene was to what it was describing. In my head, I didn't remember any of the cutscenes.
Well, I'm talking about Proxy.
Oh, yes.
Huge difference.
There's an enormous... Let's wait until I do the book summary, though, to do that, because it is so fundamentally a different scene.
Yeah, absolutely. But it ends the same way, where Proxy states that his primary programming has been erased and that he is of no use, and Starkiller has an emotional moment and says, you're always of use.
Yeah.
And then you go and meet with the 3 senators that have agreed to start the rebellion.
Yep.
You get...
the senator of Corellia, whose name I forget, it's Garm something. And then Mon Mothma, who's in the movies and most of the games.
And Bail Organa. And Leia.
And, Leia's there by proxy.
Via proxy.
Ironically, the word actually works in this case.
Yes, it does.
Coda shows up too, and he's no longer wearing the bandage on his eyes.
Yes, Coda shows up, and he's no longer disheveled.
That's true. He did look pretty nasty after they rescued him.
Coda walks into the meeting and says that he'll join the rebellion as well, and he looks respectable. He looks like a Jedi.
Yeah.
And then the rebellion meeting gets attacked by Vader. And Starkiller learns that Vader always meant to betray him, and that the only reason Starkiller was still alive was to weed out the Emperor's enemies.
Yep.
And they take him all alive, except Starkiller, who gets thrown down a cliff.
First he gets hit with a table.
That's true.
Then he gets thrown off a cliff.
Yes. Starkiller during the scene where Starkiller is kind of hanging for dear life off the cliff, he tells Vader that without him, Vader would never be free.
And then Vader says something to him, and he says, "You never meant to betray the Emperor." And Vader's like, "Not with you, no."
Yeah, a little foreshadowing to the movies.
Yeah, it's a good Vader one-liner too.
Yeah, it is.
Like to the point and cruel.
Yep. So then Juno picks Starkiller up at the bottom of the cliff. And Starkiller has a vision of the Death Star and of Coda.
Yep, this time he tries to be a Jedi for realsies, and he tries to do the future thing, and stuff starts floating around him, and the book did this way better.
Yeah, the book did do this way better.
At this point...
Juno says to him, isn't this what Jedi do? And Starkiller responds with, this is the first time I've ever been a Jedi.
I think she says something like, have you ever tried this before? Because he explains he's trying to do the Jedi thing, and she goes, have you ever done it before? And he goes, no, I've never been a Jedi before. But this is the point where he's becoming more of a
gray Jedi than Sith.
Which we're going to see a lot of, I think, in the new movie upcoming, because in the trailer, Luke Skywalker says that, like, the only thing left for the Jedi Order to do is to end, implying that there's going to be more
I've been doing a media blackout for that. I want to go in.
That's an old line, though, because they did that in the books before.
I haven't read any of the books either.
No? Okay. And the old canon, it's not canon anymore, so it's not spoilery for you. Like, Luke goes on to found, like, the Jedi Order 2.0, and it's, like, using both sides, But who the hell knows what he means now?
Yeah. You attack the Death Star. Starkiller kisses Juno. Actually, no. Juno kisses Starkiller.
She'll never have to live it down.
Live it down.
Will I ever see you again? Probably not, no. And then he went out to go get cigarettes.
Yeah. The Emperor sends Vader to go deal with Starkiller. Starkiller fights and defeats both the Emperor and Vader, but allows them to live because killing them would cement him in the dark side, which makes sense because he was killing for revenge and anger as opposed to what the Jedi would do and just leave them with the shame of defeat. The Senators and Coda escape with Juno on the ship after an explosion of the Force between the Emperor and Starkiller dies, and the Rebel Alliance is solidified, and that's the end of the game. This was a really quick game.
It was a quick game. It does not do a whole lot to develop its own characters or its own planets, or even the mechanics are pretty slim. Did you like the game?
It was alright. The mechanics really bothered me. The story was pretty decent, but I only got to just before you go to Shaak Ti in the game before I finished the book, because I power read the book. You and I both kind of struggled with this one.
Yeah, I had a hard time with the book. We're gonna get to why, but
my reason was my life kind of got flipped upside down last month, so this one was a little difficult for me. So I ended up power reading and
power playing too, because you finished the second half of the game in like one sitting.
The last 2/3 of the game.
Yeah,
I finished it last night. I was up until 1:30 last night.
I did it in 3 days. I think it was like right at the beginning of the summer, and I knew I was going to have to get it out of the way, so I figured let's just blow through it. And I could have probably done it in 8 hours if I hadn't spent the majority of the time screaming at the control scheme.
When I backed out of Steam after I finished the game, my playtime was 7 hours.
I had 13. Some of that was like it just running because I had to get up and walk away and come back to it, but
overall I liked the game. Like I said, the mechanics really bothered me. After reading the book and then finishing the game, a lot of the stuff from the book didn't get translated into the game, and I felt the game really suffered from the lack of some of the details that the book had. I mean, we'll get into it once we start talking about the book a bit more, but I mean, the thing with Proxy on Raxus Prime, Juno being a major character in the book and pretty much a throwaway character in the game.
Coda too.
For
having your own drunken Jedi master there, he was barely used.
Yeah.
And the shorthand too,
even Proxy.
Yeah.
Proxy in the book, is a major character, but all the NPCs in this game are just throwaway characters.
Yeah. And I think that's because the game itself is such a shorthanded script.
With the game, that kiss that Juno gave Starkiller at the end was like there was no development for that.
No, they just had
there was no
development.
There was no development for it at all. But in the book, you had the character development, and I mean, I'm going to answer our question right here about whether or not I think the book added to the game and everything. I think the book did a lot better than the game of adding to the experience of the game. Because as I was reading, I could see the cutscenes in my head. I could see the characters. Unfortunately, they were in the crappy Xbox 360 3D model, but I could see all that happening, and I could see them walking around the ship in the book, and
your tune really changed after Chapter 22.
Yes, it did.
We'll reserve my opinion for the end, but we had very similar opinions up until a couple days ago. I will never play this game again, which is sad because I remember really liking it when I was in college. I think the reason I didn't finish it is because I borrowed it from somebody and they asked for it back, or maybe I got it on a rental or something. I don't know. I will never touch this game again because it was such a frustrating physical experience to play it.
I will never touch it again either. This might actually be one of the, believe it or not, this might actually be one of the books that if we do the listener giveaway contest, whatever, I might buy another copy just for myself.
Really?
I really like the book. The first half of it, you know what?
Let's wait to get into it.
Yeah, let's do the book summary, and then I'm
going to give my thoughts briefly on the game. I'll never play it again. Because of the controls, the mechanics, because at this point we'll have had a recorded podcast in which we discussed it at great depth.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah, I can always go back and rewatch the cutscenes, because the cutscenes almost make for a good enough little Star Wars fan film. The cutscenes are surprisingly high quality. But the one thing that did stand out to me that I liked was the capacity to customize your lightsaber, which I got into, and I was looking for the holocrons and the crystals and all that sorts of hidden stuff. But the area that they really fell short on that could have made the game special is as you change the colors of your lightsaber crystal, which are supposed to represent different things about the Jedi using them. They didn't have any ability to change your fighting style, however superficial that would have been. Because the book really gets into the different light style fighting techniques and the crystals, and that says a lot about where Starkiller's mind is.
Yep.
But the game completely leaves it out. It's very much
it's just arbitrary.
Yeah, click, space, click to do your false combos. And I think if they had gone and they'd taken the time to do, and I'm going to use the words because they're fresh in my mind, but the Ataru or the Juyo or the Shien, different fighting styles, even if it was just something you switch on for now, or if it factored into the boss fights, where you had to learn some of those combos and you switch it, that would have been really cool.
And the whole game, I was button mashing.
Yeah, button mashing mindlessly.
I don't like games like that, especially when it turns into a fighting game and it's a melee one-on-one combat. It shouldn't just come down to button mashing.
Yeah, unless it's a fighting game.
Yeah.
But this one doesn't know if it wants to be an RPG, if it wants to be a platformer, if it wants to be a fighting game. And it could have probably been a pretty cool fighting game if they'd stripped it out and got rid of all the mindless just exploration of these empty, undeveloped areas.
Yeah.
And they just gave you long, thorough cutscenes between them.
Absolutely.
That would have been a pretty cool, short little game. But I'll never touch it again. I'm thinking maybe we'll try the sequel. Maybe we do the book sequel.
I've played the sequel. It's 4 hours long.
Maybe I'll play the sequel then. It's so short. See what lies in there. I know there's another book.
I have the sequel.
I do too. I got it as part of a Humble Bundle.
Yeah, so did I. I got the Star Wars Humble Bundle.
Yeah.
That they had quite a while back. Because I like the RTS Star Wars game that they have.
Empire at War?
Yes.
I haven't played it.
I really enjoy that one.
I don't know why I know the title off the top of my head. I think I got it for Battlefront.
Yes, because Battlefront 1 and 2 were both in there.
And Battlefront 1 and 2. Battlefront 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. So
we're talking about the original Battlefronts, not the remake that you have to be online to play.
Yeah, I haven't played those to any extent.
I have it.
Did you ever finish downloading it?
No.
It's got to be like 10,000% now, right?
I played it for a little while, and then it ended up getting... It updated, and the update didn't take, so I uninstalled it and reinstalled it, and it went to 108% download. So I uninstalled it and then tried reinstalling it, and then other things got in the way, and now I don't have Xbox Live anymore, so I don't have a reason to install it, because you have to be online to play, which I think is ridiculous. Because with Battlefront 1 and 2, you can play
I used to love doing the campaigns on my own.
Yeah, I absolutely love those games. It's been so long since I've played, though. You and I might have to play some of that.
I wonder if we can still direct connect on Steam.
Maybe. We'll have to look into that. Shall we move on to the book?
Yep. So the way that... I want to predicate this and say we're going to cover most of the same ground, but it's going to be in a different level of detail because the book itself covers the same events, but in much greater detail.
Yes.
The story is effectively the same as the game story. There's almost no difference, but the degree of detail and the way that the book is structured is a little bit different. So it was published the same year that the game came out. It's by Sean Williams. I think there may have been some co-author stuff going on.
I'm not sure. I was looking at the cover. It says, based on a story by Hayden Blackman. I think it was Sean Williams just basing the book off the game.
Okay. Well, the reason I theorize that, though, is because there's a huge quality jump.
After Chapter 22.
After Chapter 22.
Yes.
And the very first part of the book, which covers half of the game, is nothing more than summary.
Yeah. There's
with some added dialogue. That's it.
Yeah, there's really no,
and it's
character development.
Yeah.
Except for anyone except for Starkiller.
Yeah, and it's paint by numbers, too. It's pre-mission, mission summary, post-mission. Yep. Pre-mission, post-mission. It's the exact same thing over and over again for 22 chapters.
Yeah.
I almost wonder, to what degree either Sean Williams had the capacity to improve on that first part, or if he took over at that point and rewrote the book but was forced to keep that structure.
Maybe.
With these books, because they're often written by committee, where it's got to be approved by the license manager, it's got to be approved by the producer of the game, it's got to be approved by the agent, and there's always a bunch of people who there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And so ultimately what you get is usually a pared down thing. But it came out the same year as the game. The thing that has changed in that time is that when the book came out, it was actually canon. It was an official authorized part of the Star Wars universe. So the events really happened until George Lucas sold Star Wars as a license to Disney. And Disney basically took all the stuff that wasn't in the movies and then made it legends or non-canon. So you can still enjoy the stories, you can still have fun with the characters and the events, but it's no longer part of the same shared space as the movies. They've been divided. So there's even a difference in your cover because your book is older than my book.
Yeah, or mine doesn't have the Legends banner on it.
So I bet, like, if we flip and look at the printing year, this one is a 2012 edition, although the copyright's only listed as 2009, was the latest edition.
Mine is a 2008, 2009.
Yeah, so my book is 4 years older than, or 4 years younger than yours.
Yep.
The edition.
Do you have this in the front of it?
No. Oh, yeah, I do.
You have the timeline?
The Star Wars Legends novels timeline. So is yours the Legends novels?
No, mine is the Star Wars novels timeline.
Okay, so then that's entirely different. And here's A New Hope, Return of the Jedi, and then
Yep.
Mine goes farther, and it goes into a 40 plus years after Star Wars: A New Hope. So it lists all the books, but these are specifically for the Legends. So what contains them is probably the same thing, but this is all the non-canon books now.
Yep. I was actually just looking at it. We were kind of trying to figure out the timeline of when this happened. This falls 5 to 2 years before A New Hope. It's the very last one on the list, just before A New Hope.
I have a couple more. Here's A New Hope. I have The Force Unleashed 2, and then Death Star and Shadow Games.
Death Star comes after A New Hope.
Huh. So
your timeline's different than mine too, because mine doesn't have the Rebellion, the New Republic, anything like that. It's based purely off the movies.
So it's interesting that they did that, because in 4 years the context of the book has changed. You know, where it falls in the timeline, all that stuff has shifted. But like we were talking about before we did the game summary, the book is set a few months to maybe a few years before Rogue One.
Yes.
It has to be, because of the events of the book and the limitations that puts on the entire canon. So going into it, you got to know that you're not reading something that's going to matter to the new movies, since J.J. Abrams took over the director and now Rian Johnson with The Last Jedi. This is fan fiction and nothing more. I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see some references, because they are beginning to pull some stuff from the Legends universe over slowly into the new Star Wars canon. And I think this, if it underwent some revision, could be a nice little aside within Star Wars. I don't think that, there's anything here that should disqualify it.
No.
It's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It does not open with a prologue.
No, I was a little surprised with that.
In fact, it's really different in that way, because the game has a prologue. And in the game's prologue, you play Vader on Kashyyyk getting Starkiller. It just opens right away. The first part is called Imperial. It's not necessarily the clearest written. This is again why I think there may have been at least one hand in writing this first chapter, but it's set primarily after a grueling training session with Vader, and Vader knights his apprentice, or something like it. And you do see that in the game. He's given the title officially of apprentice in his very first Sith mission. Kill Ram Koda, a Jedi who Vader doesn't seem to have any history with, other than he's just continuing to carry out Order 66.
Order 66.
So he's got to go kill him. Vader does impress him that he cannot be discovered by the Emperor. So that means no witnesses.
No witnesses. That's the first reference of the no witnesses.
Yep, and it's much more prevalent in the book than it is in the game.
Very much so.
Before Starkiller can return to his ship, which is called the Rogue Shadow, very Star Wars and also very metal, he's attacked by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's not actually Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's Proxy, who is Starkiller's training droid / nurse robot? Friend?
Thing?
Babysitter.
Yeah.
Proxy's got a lot more roles in the book than he does in the game. So Proxy's primary programming is to kill Starkiller in a lightsaber duel or in some sort of like Star Wars style combat. Basically to keep Starkiller always on his toes, always feeling vulnerable, very Sith-y. They fight, they cause a very loud ruckus, which draws Juno Eclipse's attention. She's his new pilot, but that's in the next chapter. And they do flow together well, the chapters.
Yes, they do.
It's roughly the same as the very first major cutscene, but with a few extra minutes added in. We don't hear his name. We don't hear Starkiller yet. He's just the apprentice. And it stays that way for most of the book. They don't go back to the Starkiller thing very often.
No.
It's infrequent. And I thought that there's decent combat off the bat. They did a pretty good job explaining the sword fighting.
I very much agree with that.
And
the combat, all the combat is very well written.
And right off the bat, we start to hear the different modes of lightsaber combat. So in this case, he references Soresu, which is the one that Obi-Wan fights with, which, as it is described in the book, is a non-aggressive style with maximum defense. So a lot of waving the saber in circles in order to deflect things and constantly keeping it in front of you. And the thing about this book is that it really takes the Force combat and the lightsabers seriously. More so than any other Star Wars book I've ever read. This is a book about Force combat and lightsabers, because he's constantly tinkering with his. It changes throughout the book several times, and he will often match his fighting style to that of another one. So as we run into those different terminologies, I'll stop and explain them. But if anybody's curious who didn't know that there were 7 different schools of lightsaber combat, I did not know until I read the book, I'd say go look at it on YouTube. There's a pretty interesting community of people who take lightsaber training very seriously as like theatrical stage combat and a way to work out, and it was pretty interesting. And as somebody who is trained in the Lichtenauer sword fighting tradition myself, it was pretty interesting to see a different side of it. Kyle has some sword training too, so
a little bit.
He can relate to that too. In Chapter 2, Juno Eclipse, who is the highly talented Imperial pilot, overhears the fighting that was happening in Chapter 1, and so she goes over there to investigate. She pulls her gun, so she's actually armed. She's not just armed with a big pair of cleavage, as she is in the game.
Yeah.
She actually goes over there to investigate. We learn that she secretly assigned her to the Rogue Shadow. She was previously from Black 8. There's a difference in the game there. It used to be Black 5. And she sees the apprentice kill Obi-Wan and is kind of shocked until it turns out to be Proxy. So she sees the hologram fade. She overhears them talking, and Proxy explains that he's designed to train and kill, blah, blah, blah. Just like in the game, she sees a soft moment here too. One of many throughout the book where he's kind to Proxy, and Proxy's like, I'm sorry I failed you. And he's like, oh, it's okay, Proxy. And he's nice to the robot. And so she sees a different non-Sithy side of him right away. And that kind of sets her first impression, makes her react to him throughout the book very differently than if she'd just seen him hack Proxy to pieces, I'm sure. She's also introduced in an incredibly awkward way where Starkiller sees her and then has a juvenile reaction and wants to know who's the girl. And Proxy turns on the hologram and pretends to be her, and she sees Proxy become her, and that unnerves her, as it probably would to anybody.
Yeah.
Proxy runs down her basic history with Starkiller real quickly, and she approaches them and asks if there's a psychological profile in there too, and Proxy turns off the hologram and goes, yeah, but it's restricted, dropping a seed for later in the book when she wants to know more. These 2 chapters kind of set the pace for the first 15-20 minutes of the game. Does a decent job.
Yeah.
It's very prologue-y though. The dialogue's a little precious maybe, because in Chapter 3, then we get into the meat of it. Proxy introduces their very first target, who is Ram Koda. We already know this, but the book feels the need to repeat itself, as their very first target. And we learned much more about him than we learned in the game. He survived the Purge because he had no clone troopers assigned to him, not just because he didn't have clone troopers, which is what they say in the game, but because he felt that the clone troopers were nowhere near as good as his own troops. And so he had his own elite little army with him, and when Order 66 came round, the order to execute all the Jedi, he didn't have anybody there to carry out the order. So he survived, and he's since become a guerrilla terrorist, kind of like Saw Gerrera in Rogue One. He is currently at Nar Shaddaa, the smuggler's moon, and he's attacking the Imperial TIE Fighter facility that we talked about before. And he's doing that to draw Vader out. So he's making a big target of himself. They land in the hangar. Starkiller proceeds alone, immediately starts slaughtering everybody he sees because there can't be any witnesses, and eventually he gets there with very little real effort to get to Ram Koda, and then there's a boss fight. And this is kind of the structure of the first 22 chapters of the book, is we had our little dramatic or little emotional pre-chapter, then we're going to skim through the level itself, and then we're going to have our post-op. There's a duel. It's prequel-tastic. They're leaping and swinging their sabers and using the Force to throw stuff at each other. Finally, they lock sabers. Forever, it seems like. So he has a vision of him, Koda, in the apprentice's future just before Starkiller blinds him with his lightsaber. But Starkiller also has a little bit of a touch of the future there. He's got a little bit of a sensitive moment. And then he uses the Force to blow Koda out of the window. They don't see him die, but he figures, well, we're nearly in orbit, so...
There's no way he could have survived the fall.
Definitely not. And then Starkiller leaps out of the window and lands on the Rogue Shadow and survives. In Chapter 4, after returning successfully and shaking down the ship, Juno goes looking for what secrets the Empire might have on her. We learn that her mother is dead and her father is missing in action. This is a book about daddy problems. Juno is really attached to the idea that her dad did not come to her graduation, but he's an Imperial supporter and so kind of set her moral compass. We also learn that she was an excellent cadet, but as she is looking at what the Empire has on her, because she's also an experienced hacker somehow, she stumbles on a camera feed in Vader's personal quarters back on the Executor, the Super Star Destroyer from...
Well, that's where she is right now.
Yeah, they go back to
the Executor.
So somehow she finds Vader's personal quarters, and she sees Starkiller report in and receive his next mission. She also overhears their goal, their real goal here, and that's to kill the Emperor. So really quickly, Juno knows what's going on. In the game, she doesn't seem to know the score until much later. In the book, she kind of knows it from the beginning, and she's torn 2 ways about it. She is kind of trapped because Vader will kill her if she does anything. She's also an Imperial sympathizer and thinks the Emperor is, all the hoots and giggles. So she's got to catch 22. She's horrified, but what's she going to do about it?
Yep.
At this point, Juno becomes a recurring focal character.
Yes.
Much more so than Starkiller. She's got almost every other chapter has at least something from her perspective. Chapter 5, Vader dispatches Starkiller to Raxus Prime, so we're already jumping into the third mission, if you include the prologue mission. The junk world to find another Jedi named Kazdan Paratus. Kazdan was, we learn, an engineer for the Jedi. He escaped the Order because he fought with an army of droids. So just like with Coda, he didn't have droids, or he didn't have the clone troopers around him, so there was nobody there to carry out Order 66. His prowess with engineering also explains why he's able to build the big guardians all over Raxus Prime. And in his spare time, he found a way to build a new Jedi temple out of junk, complete with a set appropriate Masters conference room.
Yeah.
With junk versions of all the Masters.
Council chamber.
Council chamber, yeah. En route, Juno has a flashback to a combat flight with Vader that went terribly wrong, but she wakes up before it comes to anything, so it's foreshadowing for later on. She's got some PTSD. They waste no time at all finding Kazdan. Apparently, he's just wherever it is they decided to land. There's no difficulty. It's probably made easier by the fact that he built himself a giant Jedi junk temple, though.
Yeah.
Not subtle.
No, not at all.
One thing I did want to note here that hadn't occurred to me until Chapter 5 is that I never considered the smell of any of the game levels, but like a substantial chunk of the game takes place on either a garbage planet or like a mushroom planet. And I feel like the book does a much better job of building out the other senses, even though like you can't smell the book any more than the video game. The video game doesn't even talk about the fact that Raxus Prime reeks. It's a garbage planet.
Yeah.
And the fact that Felucia smells like rotting organic material. So I did like the fact that the author went to the lengths to try and provide more sensory information to build it out, because that is part of what determines how Starkiller behaves. He's very much in tune with his emotions and his senses, and very Sith-like. In Chapter 6, Raxus Prime, we discover is crappy. Not that they couldn't tell that from orbit, but Starkiller complains about it. It's a garbage dump. He points that out pretty much every other page, and eventually he runs into a bunch of Rhodians. So think from A New Hope. Greedo, they look like Cubert, but green with mohawks and antenna. They're just scavengers. There's Jawas there. Houdini! I mean, there's no challenge for him.
No.
He just cuts and hacks his way through these people. And it makes the chapter boring. It's just, how is he going to get past this giant hunk of metal? He's going to cut his way through it. Or he's going to use the Force to push it, which I thought was interesting. In the game, it's like a little jet turbine-sized hyperdrive that he like knocks a hole in a wall with. But in this case, he goes to the hyperdrive and he turns it on and then garbage sledges himself closer to the temple. Alright, that's cooler. But ultimately, because there's no challenge, there's no real commitment to the chapter. And you're like, well, alright, he's not going to get hurt here. These guys can't even touch him. But he does find Kazdan, and Kazdan is a small, greenish alien with spider legs. I didn't really care what the species name was.
Nope.
It's like Star Wars, whatever the prop designer came up with that day. Kazdan puts up almost no fight. He dies much faster in the book than he did in my playthrough. That's for sure. He also, Starkiller gets inside his head by smashing up the junk Jedi Council.
Actually, the Council attacks him.
Yeah, they turn into droids, and so he destroys them brutally, and then Kazdan just gives up.
Wasn't in the game.
Yeah, that was not in the game. I thought that was clever. Little differences. But then Starkiller is back aboard Rogue Shadow. This is like a 5-minute mission, and just to remind you, Vader's like, I do not expect you to survive, but if you do, we'll be ready. Starkiller's like hack slash space, left click again, and Kazdan's dead. But we switch back to Juno in Chapter 7 for our post-mission debrief. Juno gets all hot and bothered by Starkiller's sensuous Jedi-killing lips as they prepare to land on Felucia. Did I skip a page?
No.
No, yeah, it just does jump right into the third one.
Right into Felucia.
Where their third target's located. Starkiller leaves Juno and Proxy in the Rogue Shadow, and Proxy reveals to Juno's questioning that Darth Vader, in fact, raised Starkiller and insisted that he remain solitary to help his primary programming, which is Jedi killing. Juno is a little bit unnerved by the fact that Starkiller is probably a psychopath, and then while patrolling the landing site, she is hit again with another flashback. And again, they don't get to the head of it, just the beginning, but it seems like she must have destroyed some sort of world by trying to bargain with Vader to save lives. He got her to do something that was much worse.
Blow up a reactor.
Also, it's worth noting that they landed on a mushroom. They do this a lot.
Yeah, they do.
And they mention it every time.
Yes, they do.
Juno gets better at it.
Yes, she does.
Mushroom landing skill keeps going up. From a narratology perspective here, Juno's chapters are much more emotionally human.
Yes.
They're more interesting. Like, hers is the more interesting story. And you have that issue with the prequels a lot. It sticks to Anakin, but Anakin's not the most interesting character in the story. He never is. You know, he's all-powerful and has no challenge and can't decide what he wants to do, but the choices aren't really human. The interesting characters are the ones around him. Just like Han and Leia, and you get the same issue with Luke, and I bet we're going to have the same issue with Rey.
Yeah,
the human characters around them are much more interesting. So Juno's chapters tend to be more interesting from a written perspective. Also, she gets more into the sci-fi aspect of the universe. They talk about the ships and how the technology works and the different functions and utilities of the droids, and as far as world building goes, the majority of it is done with Juno. Jumping forward into chapter 8.
There's one thing I want to touch on for chapter 7 that you kind of skipped right over.
Okay.
You also get a look into Juno's personality a little bit here. She goes, an inner monologue about how she wanted to be a xenobiologist.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Before her mother passed away. But her father disapproved of that career. He wanted her to be a pilot. So that's why she went into the Imperial Navy. So we get a little more daddy issue there. But I thought it was an interesting little character development there, that piloting wasn't really what she wanted to do. She really wanted to be a xenobiologist.
Yeah. She should have played No Man's Sky. You can do both. In chapter 8, Starkiller is busy hunting Shaak Ti. She's a powerful... I called her a Jedi witch. Who is hiding amongst the Force-using Felucian primitives. They can use telekinesis to punch each other, and somehow they have bone swords that are resistant to lightsabers.
Yeah.
Okay, Star Wars. You do you.
Well, in the game, they're kind of glowing with that Force color, so I'm wondering if maybe they're coated in the Force, and that's why they're resistant to the lightsaber.
It says that they're just Rancor bone.
Oh.
And if that's the case, I don't know how Luke managed to stab the Rancor, because, whatever. So, yeah, the Felucian primitives are somewhat Force sensitive, but they're very, very simple.
Or how you managed to kill all the Rancor in the game.
Yeah, right?
I hated those.
Those QuickTime events.
Lightning.
Lightning was it. This is the first time that he is actually challenged as a character. He has a hard time getting through Felucia because it's so abundant and fecund with the Force. The light side of the Force. But the downside to this is that it draws him right to Shaak Ti because it's coming from her. And so because it's so vibrant with life, it means it's got a lot of the Force around it, much more than your average barren sand planet with 2 suns. So he has a hard time getting around because the Force is trying to stop him from getting to her.
Are you talking about Tatooine?
Maybe. But he does cut his way through as a true Sith should, and proceeds to slaughter and hack his way through all the natives towards Shaak Ti until he encounters a huge tooth. And when he cuts this huge, strange-looking boulder, the whole ground shakes, and that's how we know it's a tooth. It's a Sarlacc tooth. And this is when I had to go back and look at the cutscenes, and I was like, oh, that level was set largely on a Sarlacc pit. Huh.
Yeah, you can see the teeth in the game. You can actually rip them out with the Force and chuck them at things.
Didn't even connect that's what that was. But it's a cool setting. This is an old, big Sarlacc.
Yep.
It's not some little desert pit.
I believe she called it the
Ancient Abyss.
Ancient Abyss, yeah. Yes.
So it's not some little one like in Tatooine that's starved. It's huge, miles across. Teeth are all over the place, and that plays into how he proceeds. Starkiller realizes that there must be some vast creature below the ground. And at the very center of town, he meets Shaak Ti, also at the Sarlacc's throat. Boba Fett's beware. And the duel begins. It's a pretty good match, and they edge closer to the pit as they go. She's using the control and stoic Jedi fighting. He's using the crazy emotional Sith.
Using anger and fear to drive him deeper into the Force.
It's interesting. They start to get into the discussions of the mentality as they're using it, and you get a little bit more of the discussions of the different lightsaber fighting schools. I liked the chapter. I thought it was pretty good, but the way that he defeats her is almost by accident.
Yeah.
She impels herself on his lightsaber. That's kind of dumb.
Yep, and her chest doesn't explode.
Her chest totally explodes. She falls into the pit, but only after warning that the Sith betray one another. The Felucians surround him, and then the apathy wins, and they walk away, because they're really part of the dark side of the Force. Juno hacks into Starkiller's meditation chamber surveillance feed in Chapter 9, where she sees Vader's hologram, recalls Starkiller to the Executor again. She's delighted because they succeeded. When they go to see Darth Vader, though, Juno tries to keep an eye on both of them by spying on Vader's chamber, but it takes her a little while to get it. Before she can learn anything, a small Imperial fleet suddenly appears, bearing the Emperor himself.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Run away.
With no warning, though, Darth Vader stabs Starkiller in the back. Proxy beams the Emperor in, which is different than in the game because it's not the Emperor himself who shows up. It's just Proxy doing Proxy's thing. And the Emperor orders him to kill Starkiller, so of course he slams him around and throws him through a window out into orbit.
And floats around for a little while.
Yeah. Back aboard the Rogue Shadow, Juno is stormed by what appear to be a group of the Emperor's guards. So she gets her pistol out and sets it aside from a safe distance and goes out to surrender herself. That's the end of part 1.
What did you think of part 1?
Humdrum.
Yep, my thoughts on it are it's well written, follows the game plot, seems to expand well on the game as far as character development.
Not meaningfully though. It never lifts its finger above what the cutscenes tell you. Aside from giving you a little bit more background context in the missions.
And a lot more background on Juno. That was more what I was referring to.
Yeah, it does. It definitely, I'll give you that. It definitely gives more context on Juno herself. I feel like the first part is so summary laden that it suffers for it.
I will agree with you there.
Part 2 is called Empirical, but it's spelled like E-M-P, like the science. Puns. Chapter 10, Starkiller drifts in and out of consciousness and has visions, keyword there, of the people he killed, including Shaak Ti and her previously unmentioned apprentice. So we don't see the cutscene like we do in the game of her ordering Maris Brood to leave. This is where he kind of becomes aware of her. Also, he's beginning to change a little bit because Sith don't have visions like that. He sees the future, maybe, and glimpses of his own past, and Juno in pain. So we get a little bit of an Anakin moment watching Padme in childbirth. In Chapter 11, the apprentice comes to in Darth Vader's surgical theater, kind of a reversal of the scene from Revenge of the Sith, where Vader wakes up on the table and the Emperor torments him. This time it's Vader calmly informing him that he is still a tool.
Yes, he is a tool.
That's it. He doesn't use the word slave, which I thought was interesting. It takes a long time for them to get around to that. But yeah, he's still just Vader's tool. He can either continue to serve Vader as a tool or he can die. There's your choices. So he chooses to serve for now. Starkiller agrees, having no choice, and Vader fades, revealing Proxy's body. Apparently it's been about 6 months since he got thrown through the window, and in the meantime Vader has rebuilt his body. But we do not know to the extent with which he's been cyborgized.
His hands are clear of scars.
His whole body's clear of scars.
Yes. The major thing that gets brought up throughout the game is the fact that his hands no longer bear all the scars of combat.
Yeah, and that unnerves Starkiller because he doesn't know to what extent he is a robot, and that's something that everybody knows about Vader is that he walks like a cyborg, and people don't like that. Darth Vader charges him with basically going off the record, going right outside the boundaries and forming a rebellion in order to overthrow the Emperor and blah, blah,
as a
blah.
Distraction and yada yada.
Turncoat, blah, double agent, whatever. It's not a great plan.
No, it is not.
Proxy sets the medical station on a collision course with a nearby star.
It's not a medical station.
What was it? It was a research station, right?
It was Vader's secret research station. Vader shouldn't have secrets.
Can't be trusted.
No, we cannot.
Yeah, so Proxy jumps the gun, though, and throws it into the nearby star.
Yeah.
And jettisons all the escape pods without anybody on them, which I thought was kind of funny. So
in the game, you can actually blow 6 of them up.
Oh, can you?
You shock them with the lightning, and they run into the wall, and then they explode. It's actually one of the secondary missions.
Oh, I didn't know that. Also, a little note here, because I did say that like the book is very much about the lightsabers. The lightsaber that Vader leaves for Starkiller is Koda's saber.
Yep.
So it's a vibrant, bright green. No longer red, but green. That jumps us into Chapter 12, unless you have anything to add.
Nope.
Cool. Okay. So Juno, we find, has been prisoner on the station for the last 6 months. She's still wearing the same clothes, apparently.
Gross.
Weird detail. She's been not quite tortured, but definitely neglected and abused by the stormtrooper guards that she has.
Yep. Every 5 hours, she gets a 10-minute break from the shackles.
Yeah.
To do whatever.
And then she's put back up in the shackles, and she's given a little bit of yard time and blah, blah, blah. It's like maximum security. And every day she's waiting to be executed, basically. Yep. But she doesn't know when anything is coming, and that's what leads me to think that Vader kept them together for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
When Starkiller and Proxy are freed, Proxy begins to self-destruct the research station. She hears the commotion and starts to wonder what the heck's going on. We do get a lot of daddy issues and PTSD from the war crimes here. That fills the majority of her narration, is this like stream of conscious flow between the guilt and the shame and the uncertainty of her situation. But when the alarms start going off, she knows something huge has changed. And before they can come to kill her, Starkiller comes to rescue her. So in Chapter 13...
Here he comes to save the day!
Starkiller saves Juno in Chapter 13. As the Empirical crashes into the local star. They slaughter a bunch of stormtroopers. It's a 4-page chapter.
Yeah.
That's about it. Pretty much different. It's pretty different from the game, though. Like, in the game, him rescuing Juno is like a cutscene. This takes a span of several chapters. There's much more of an emotional element to it, a dimension to it. Also, her prison situation is much more intense. There's no context given for her prison in the game.
No.
So when you see her and she's like, looks like she's being crucified, you're like, what?
Yeah.
You know, but in this, you know better, so there's a little more of an emotional dimension to him rescuing her. Oh boy.
So, moving on to chapter 13. It is a 4-page chapter.
Yep.
I have a single sentence, because that was it. That was all that happened.
Yep.
Starkiller sets Juno free and they escape on the Rogue Shadow. That is the meat of the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of chapters like this.
Like the next one, which is only 3 pages long.
Really?
Yep. I have all the page numbers written down as I went.
Oh.
So in chapter 14, they are sort of adrift without a plan on the Rogue Shadow, and they have to come to terms with their new life as not being Vader's direct pawns, but rather indirect pawns. Although Juno does not know. So Starkiller is kind of leading a double life. He tells Juno that he is leaving the Empire forever, and their next stop is to see if Ram Koda is still alive. Because he thinks he knows a Jedi that can help them start this rebellion that Vader has charged him with beginning. And this is where he begins to change over into more of a gray Jedi, because he's very mad about being betrayed. He's very upset about being rebuilt. And it's clear he's going off the beaten path.
Starkiller's explanation to Juno for going after Koda is quoting Koda's vision about him, saying that Koda was part of his future.
Yeah.
Assuming that this is what he meant.
My one note for this chapter is that you would have thought it would have taken a little longer to kill 3 Jedi, travel halfway across the galaxy, spend 6 months being rebuilt, and then get to this point of betrayal.
Yeah.
But they did it in 118 pages.
Yep. Just like the game.
Yeah, it's fast. This begins to be a key part of Starkiller's story, is that he's becoming a gray Jedi, and that is a person that follows the Jedi Code generally, but they fall outside the Council's strictures in one way or another. So like Qui-Gon, who didn't quite follow and was looking for the living force, or Luke after Return of the Jedi, where he uses his emotions along with the code, or I'm trying to think of other examples from the movies, but I'm drawing blanks on them. There's a lot of these that they're not strictly Jedi and they're not strictly Sith. They're somewhere in the middle. They're called Grey Jedi. He's becoming one of those. In chapter 15, though, it turns out that Ram isn't on Nar Shaddaa. They skip that entirely. In fact, he's on Bespin in Cloud City, which is where they go in Empire Strikes Back. Starkiller finds him there drunk in a bar and just full of despair. Before he can extract Koda to get him on his side, local security shows up and they have to fight. It's a very different kind of fight, though, because Starkiller can't just cut his way to the end of the level. He's got to be a little more careful about civilians because he doesn't want to tip Koda off that he is a rage monster, 15-year-old aggro beast. So he's got to be more careful. It's harder to exfil than he expects because he runs into a servant of the Emperor who uses a light pike, which is like a little lightsaber on the end of a big pole. The first one he fights is actually pretty tough. The second one he fights is not that hard.
Garbage.
And then the third one is a joke. So these are the Emperor's other apprentices, I guess.
Apparently. That's what Starkiller assumes.
They're tougher to fight in the game than they are for him.
Yeah.
They're like sub-bosses in the game. In this, they're temporary distractions.
Mini-boss.
Yeah.
Mini-boss, not sub-boss.
Whatever.
It's a gaming podcast. Use gaming terminology.
I stand corrected. This chapter didn't do anything for me.
No.
This is one of the ones I really struggle with because it's 10 pages long and it's just then he did this, then he did this, then he did that, then they went here, then Koda said this, then they did this, and it's like
it's an and then chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know if I knew they were on Cloud City in the game. Like I saw the weird little munchkin guys that build stuff in Empire Strikes Back, but I don't think I connected that they were in Cloud City. I thought they were on Nar Shaddaa. I didn't connect where they actually were. So the book does a much better job of giving you a sense of place.
He does fight Uggernauts.
Uggernauts, yeah.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. When I was playing the game and Jen was watching, she was like, "What are those things?" "Those are Uggernauts!" And I was really excited.
Yeah, because you would have read this part.
Yep.
After you, yeah, okay, so you knew. I don't know. I had no connection to this in the game or in the book. I just thought it was a humdrum, blah, blah. Chapter 16, Koda reveals that their connection is on Kashyyyk. So they got to go to Kashyyyk, which is where the prologue in the game is set. Juno is not at all happy about returning to an Empire-controlled area.
Nope.
Because she does not want to go back to prison for life. She's also not really happy with Starkiller's taciturn, juvenile brooding. She doesn't get why he won't open up to her. And they start trying to suggest a romance, but it's very juvenile. Also, he's having night terrors. It's the first time they bring this up in the game, but he keeps waking them up screaming in the middle of their sleeping period. Her misery is interrupted, though, when Proxy tries again to kill Starkiller and fails. And the general, Coda, reveals that it is not a person, but an object on Kashyyyk that they need to acquire. I was a little confused by that line.
Yeah.
Because Leia's a woman, but not an object. It was a long time ago, though.
In a galaxy far, far away.
They had different values than we do now. Unhappily, Starkiller is dropped off, leaving a nervous Juno and a suspicious Coda aboard. On the surface of Kashyyyk, insert Wookiee scream here, Starkiller makes his way to the target much more carefully than on previous missions, partly because of the wildlife, which is way more dangerous even than on Felucia, and partly because of the skyhook. And the skyhook is basically the space elevator, and in the book, it's a physical metal construct that's being used to ferry the Wookiee slaves up into orbit for some unknown purpose that will be discussed shortly. And that means there's much heavier Imperial resistance than there would have otherwise been. And he actually starts using Jedi mind tricks here. So it's more of that gray Jedi mentality. He's also being plagued by uncertainty. Like as he marches through the forest, doing his Sithy things, he's having a harder and harder time keeping Vader's real mission and his loyalty straight as he goes. It's testing him. He is also starting to feel like this uncertain butterflies in his stomach because something about Kashyyyk is triggering some sort of memory or vision in him, maybe a prophecy. He doesn't know because he's never been through this kind of emotional turmoil before. And then he ambushes a couple stormtroopers and he learns that there is in fact an important guest, or I guess in Coda's terms, an important object who's staying on Kashyyyk, and that must be what he's looking for, so of course he goes in that direction. Anything to add?
He also notices that looking up at the skyhook resembled one of his visions he had while he was in between life and death stage. And then he found an encampment, and he needs to break in. That doesn't follow at all like the game. The game was like this big, huge facility, whereas this, they call it the Lodge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That annoyed me.
I don't know. I had some issues with the structure of these Kashyyyk chapters. In Chapter 18, Starkiller infiltrates the Imperial presence on Kashyyyk, going through the camps, and Juno hacks into the Imperial data and discovers that the Skyhook is ferrying the Wookiee slaves into orbit. Why or for what, she can't discern, because she's not that good of a hacker. She also learns that Vader was on Kashyyyk at one point.
But for a completely different mission.
Something like that. She discovers that the Black Eight, her elite TIE fighter squad, that she was in charge of before Vader transferred her, is now led by a psychopath who thought that her genocide on Kalos, now we learn what it was a genocide of the biosphere there, just wasn't enough. I don't know why they bother to tell us this, because they don't do nothing with it.
Nope.
Even more, Youngster, one of her former squad mates, is in fact in orbit of Kashyyyk. But instead of hailing him and blowing their cover, which she really wants to do...
Yep, she fights with herself.
She fights with her hands, specifically. The idiot and its friend.
Don't you ever do that.
Don't ever blow my cover. She looks up on her own records and sees, in fact, that she's been branded a traitor and incompetent, and that she's been executed by the Empire.
Yep. She is dead, according to the Empire.
So all of her accomplishments as an elite fighter pilot have been chalked up to luck. And that's it. So it does flesh Juno's character out a little bit, but it does give us a fair bit of completely unnecessary information, too.
Yes.
In Chapter 19, Starkiller on the surface has met heavy resistance in the form of ATSTs. These fights were terrible in the game, but thankfully they're pretty easy in the book. He defeats them with the Force, and then gets back into contact with Juno and Coda. He tells Coda that he's seen something, but Coda directs him to go further into the Wookiee Lodge that the ATSTs were guarding, where he finds Princess Leia, the object he's been sent to acquire. Thankfully, she's not in another lodge. Starkiller tries to convince her to leave, but she refuses.
He's a little short to be a stormtrooper.
Oh, God. It's true.
Sorry, I had to.
Starkiller tries to convince her to leave, but she refuses because of the Skyhook. She's not, I think like on two levels, she's not allowed to leave because she's supposed to oversee it, but also she's really just a hostage.
Yeah, pretty much.
Did we leave out how early they introduced her into the game? Because they just stick that cutscene like a whole level earlier. I think we did.
Yeah, we did.
It's jumbled. Anyway, Leia's there.
Yep.
R2-D2 is there.
Yep.
Shrug. Star Wars effect.
They didn't actually, when Leia refers to him, it's not letter R, number 2, letter dash, letter D.
ARTOO-DEETOO.
Yep. R2-D2.
Weird.
I was like...
It could have been any droid. It didn't need to be him. Or it, I suppose, because R2 has no effect other than to just holographically project the Skyhook plans. No. It could have been anybody. It could have been Red 4, the crappy droid from A New Hope that blows up. I think that's his name, R4. So she basically dispatches him to go take down the Skyhook. My note here is I had completely forgotten she was in this. In Chapter 20, Juno and Coda up in orbit pass on the info that Leia is safe to, I guess, her dad, but they can't relax. Their stealth won't last forever because Rogue Shadow is a stealth ship. Not that it matters to the game or the book. They're never detected anyway, and I don't think we ever actually see the stealth functioning.
From the way the book explains it, the way I can tell it works is it doesn't actually cloak the ship. The ship doesn't become invisible like in Star Trek with like the Romulans or the Klingons. The ship doesn't go invisible. It just masks the sensor readings.
Like the Normandy?
Like the Normandy from Mass Effect.
Well, in any case, their stealth crystals won't last forever, so they got to get this job done.
Why does everything run on crystals?
I don't know. They even refer to crystals as a form of life in this. When she's talking about being a xenobiologist, they talk about the crystal forms of life, the mineral forms of life.
Why is everything crystallized?
Science. So anyway, though, their science crystals won't last forever, and Starkiller's mission just got a lot longer. So he calls in about a hut that he just found, and Coda's like, "Don't go in there, boy. Just
don't do it!
Your mission.
Don't do it!"
And Coda is a teenager, and he goes, "No, Dad, you can't tell me what to do." And he goes inside the hut. Mistake. Also, I'm curious here. Coda keeps saying that his link to the Force has been cut because of his eyes, but that doesn't make any sense, right?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. It's just a weird reference. He says it several times, but the first time is in this
the way I interpreted it was that it was an excuse for him to not do anything because he's broken.
Chapter 21, Starkiller ignores Coda and investigates the hut, finding evidence of Lifesaber hacking through the door and burns all over the place. Drawn in, he finds a lightsaber focusing crystal, pretty sure. And then he's hit by a vision, part 1, of Vader coming to hunt Jedi on Kashyyyk, and this is the prologue from the game.
Yes.
So it takes place much later in the story.
At the beginning of the vision, it's not clear what Vader is doing.
Just that he's got a mission of his own.
Yep. He tells the Imperial officer that he doesn't care that they're encountering resistance.
Yeah. He's like, "I'm here on a mission of my own. Leave me alone." He finds the Jedi, easily dispatches him. Guy puts up almost no fight. But then Vader senses someone much more powerful nearby. He thinks maybe it's the Jedi's master. But the Jedi's like, "No, you killed my master years ago." And,
well, you will join him.
Yeah, something like that. And then a boy force pulls Vader's lightsaber out of his hand.
Yes.
And Vader has a very...
human moment here, actually.
It's a human moment, but what is the name of the older Baratheon? Stannis Baratheon moment, where he goes, "A son?"
I don't remember.
I don't know how I'm sitting with the biggest nerd I know who doesn't like Game of Thrones. You shame me, my boy. But Vader's like, "Oh yeah, of course it's a son," because Star Wars is very father-son cyclical.
Yes, it is.
And so then he breaks the Jedi's neck with like a flick of his fingers. He doesn't even bother to force choke him out. He just snaps his neck. And then when the other Imperial forces show up to try and reinforce Vader, he cuts them down for caring. He cuts them down for their love.
No, he cuts them down for no witnesses.
But they showed up because they love him.
They showed up because they fear him.
If I admit I don't see a difference, I blow my cover. So he ends up kidnapping the boy, though, because he knows he can use him for something. Also, it's important to note that they reference the rebel symbol from the movies.
Yes.
He sees it in the hut. When Starkiller comes to from his vision of Darth Vader, he is then hit by a second vision, a Sith fighting a brutal duel with a Jedi.
Who has claws for hands.
Yeah, which comes up in the game too, doesn't it?
I don't know. I accidentally skipped that cutscene.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm pretty sure he sees one. It's not quite the same fight scene, but he's both. It's the two halves of his personality fighting each other. Nice little visual metaphor. But the Sith kills the Jedi, and the ghost of his father emerges from the shadows and says that he never wanted this for him, and then he calls him by his name, Galen, which is not referenced in the game. So he's completely struck by this. I thought this was the very first bit of good writing in the entire book so far. Solid writing.
Yes, this is where the book takes a turning point.
Yep. And because it's the first time, I was shaky, but the next chapter is even better. Because in chapter 22, Starkiller is reeling and he flees the hut. He goes to destroy the Skyhook, which he accomplishes through the Force and through collateral damage. You get a really cool, live through his eyes kind of moment where he becomes one with the bracket that's holding the skyhook down and is able to move it. It's very much like a Yoda and Luke moment where he's like, the size doesn't matter of the thing. It's whether or not you're in tune with it. And I thought it was a very cool piece of descriptive writing. There's a TIE bombing run. He uses one of the TIEs to knock down another one of the brackets. There's an AT-ST attack, and he uses that vehicle's mass too as weapons to batter the mooring, and eventually they give it a snap. And there's a huge explosion that goes all the way up into orbit, and Starkiller is mesmerized until Juno comes to pick him up. And there's a funny difference here between the game and the book, where he's like staring mesmerized, but in the game there's like 4 Wookiees that are like clapping around him. It's a very weird like video game moment. So it's a good chapter. Okay, 23, back aboard the Rogue Shadow. Starkiller is restless because he's frustrated with this new persona that's emerging. He demands to talk to Bail Organa, but Coda says that the Senator is missing. They can't get a hold of him at all. Coda is not happy about that. Starkiller huffs off for the meditation chamber, and wanting to help, Juno follows, but her attempts to get Starkiller to talk to her fizzle because they're both not good at this whole what is love thing.
Baby, don't hurt me.
Once he's rested, Coda then reveals that Bail Organa has gone after Shaak Ti, unfortunately.
Yep.
Starkiller almost blows his cover when he reveals that he knows what planet she was on.
Felucia!
But Coda assumes that this is just Starkiller being strong in the Force and reading his mind.
Yep.
So back to Felucia.
Chapter 24 is a half a sentence for my...
Juno has a bad dream.
Yeah, pretty much! Mine is Juno has a messed up dream.
Yep. That's it. I didn't even put a period on there.
Hold on.
Why? It's pages 195 to 196.
It's not, if you look in my book, it's not even a full page.
Yeah. My note here is, why the hell is this its own chapter?
It's just like 34 and 35.
Yep.
Because 25 is the same way. It's like 2 pages long.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I don't see why it was its own thing.
No.
In chapter 25, Juno lands a Rogue Shadow near Bail Organa's transponder signal on another mushroom this time. She does a better job at it.
Yep.
Which is near heavy Imperial traffic on Felucia. Since they left, the Imperials have come down hard on this planet. Okay. The shuttle itself, though, is empty except for, I think, an insect nest.
Yes.
Or something like that. Like there's wasps inside the
something like that. And they're angry.
Yeah. Juno demands to check it with Starkiller, and she uses this as a moment to isolate him so that she can share her fear of being discovered by Coda. She doesn't want to be caught out by him. Starkiller, though, has the emotional maturity of, like, a frog. It doesn't understand what she's saying. And so he promises to kill Coda if necessary. That is not what she meant.
Nope.
So she's even more unnerved now than she was before. But Starkiller, again with the emotional maturity of a toad, marches off happily into the forest to go find Bail Organa. And as he goes, he finds out that Felucia has become much more attuned to the dark side without Shaak Ti there. So it's kind of snapped back to the other side. The forest is literally trying to kill him, snaking out vines and hitting him with tree branches and whatever. There's no Tom Bombadil to help, so he's got to fight his way through the forest. He runs into some of the natives, the native wildlife. It's a nasty place now.
Yeah, he also runs into some Felucians.
Yeah, they're mean. They jump out of a quicksand puddle to attack him, right?
Yep.
It's kind of a humdrum chapter, though, up until he runs into Imperials and Felucian natives in this big fight. And then I've got here, at the dead Sarlacc, he senses a dark presence.
And follows it.
So he tracks using the dark side of the Force here.
Yep.
And he follows it to a Rancor boneyard, or graveyard. Which it was actually referenced when Shaak Ti ordered her apprentice to leave. She said go to the graveyard.
Yep.
But it's a boneyard, like where elephants go to die in one big pile.
Like the Lion King.
But yeah, he finds a jailhouse made of bones, and Bail Organa is there imprisoned with a hank of rotten meat. Bail explains that he is the prisoner of Maris Brood, Shaak Ti's former Padawan, who has been intending to trade Bail to Vader if she's ever found, for leniency.
Yep.
Because that'll work. That's a great plan. Brood then confronts Starkiller, but before they duel, she's forced to fight her wild, dark-side-tainted bull Rancor.
Which was so impressive in the book.
Yeah, it's a pretty fierce fight that ends with Starkiller force blasting the Rancor's head apart from the inside.
Yep.
And just being covered in gore.
Don't be alarmed when I get back to the ship.
Yeah. It was pretty foul. And then it's Sith duel time. And this is a pretty good fight too. So During the duel, and it's the very first time it's the dark side versus the dark side, so they're both fighting with emotion, Starkiller realizes that the Force is a spectrum of grays, which Shakti had attempted to explain to him when she said, don't ever pretend you're standing on anything but your own 2 feet.
Yep.
They're just two ends of a continuum.
He keeps flashing back to the conversation with Shakti while he was dueling her.
Yep, and it makes more sense, and this is the first time he's ever fought another Dark Force user. So for him, this must have been a moment where he realizes the two
a Dark Force user that's trying to kill him.
Yeah.
Because he's dueled Vader in the past.
And Vader never tried to kill him, just wound him to teach him a lesson. And using this new perspective that he can leverage both sides of the Force, he overcomes Brood. He defeats her. And then at the very last, when he's finally got the chance to kill her, he decides to let her go because she's pathetic. And she flees. And then winks at him at the mushroom tree line and then disappears. Organa is pretty disappointed that he let her go, but he agrees to talk to Coda about the next steps towards the rebellion. He's very grateful that they saved Leia and that they rescued him. Pretty solid chapter. The fight was pretty cool. I enjoyed the exploration of the lore and the context of the two sides of the Force together during the fight.
Agreed.
26, Juno picks up Starkiller and is horrified to see him, even though he warns her not to be alarmed at the sight of him. Coda and Organa reunite, but Coda is weird and aloof. Organa asks Juno if she really knows about Starkiller while they're alone, and she realizes that she actually doesn't know much about him, which is a little bit unnerving. Later, Organa agrees to help start the rebellion if they can find a suitable target to demonstrate the Empire's vulnerability to get some other senators on their side. When Organa finally leaves, Juno notices a coded message mysteriously leaving the Rogue Shadow. She thinks maybe it's from Organa, but it's not.
No, she assumes Coda has sent it.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yep.
But he's asleep, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's got to be coming from somewhere else. In Chapter 27, Proxy attacks Starkiller while he's trying to figure out what clothes to wear. He doesn't want to dress like a Sith anymore. He's decided to be done with his goth punk phase. He's naked from the waist up, is my understanding. Still covered in grime, probably. But this time, Proxy attacks him as Anakin Skywalker.
Fitting.
Kind of interesting. The long dead hero from the Clone Wars. Wink, wink. It's kind of ironic, though, because then Vader comes in through Proxy.
Yup.
Shortly after their duel to threaten Starkiller and to provide a target for Organa's rebellion, because ultimately Starkiller doesn't know what to do. Vader's still got to kind of hold his hand. He tells him basically to go to this Raxus Prime, right, where they're building the Star Destroyers, and that's their next blah, blah, blah. But Juno oversees this, and she is horrified that Starkiller is still his slave. And this is the first time that Starkiller uses that terminology.
Yep, it's the first time in the game that it gets used to.
Yeah, he's ashamed of himself, but he doesn't know what else to do. But this is the beginning of him being held accountable for his own actions by somebody other than himself. In 28, the Rogue Shadow returns to Raxus Prime, and this time Juno is overwhelmed with a sense of grief at having been betrayed and for going along with it so mindlessly. She just assumed he was doing the right thing. She realizes that Starkiller didn't actually lie to her, but just didn't actually tell her the truth, and she just filled in the gaps with whatever idealistic stuff she wanted. It's her fault. She's so wound up that she nearly spills the beans to Coda when they arrive in orbit of Raxus Prime. She says something like, "Hello, garbage planet," again.
Yep.
And he's like, "Again?" And she has to make up a fiction that she was a junk hauler or something.
Yeah, she ran freighters for a while.
She skirts by the issue, and together they devise a plan to tackle the shipyard. In 27, Starkiller makes his way through the sewers of Raxus Prime, trying to avoid fights while he gets to the orbital ore launcher that they use to repurpose and recycle. The Empire is a green empire. They used to recycle the metal into new Star Destroyers.
No, it's a cheap empire.
It's totally a cheap empire. He runs into Drexel Roosh, the Rodanian scavenger from before, and his scrapper crew to confront Starkiller. They claim that when Kazdan Paratus' guardian droids fell dead, then the Emperor really descended and clamped down on them. So it's his fault that they're suffering. He doesn't care.
Nope.
Butchers them. In Chapter 30, Starkiller reaches the cannon that feeds the orbital Star Destroyer construction facility, its ore, and begins, quote-unquote, working on the security. That's his terminology. Up in the Rogue Shadow, Proxy begins acting really weird and announces that it is on his way after it deals with a few loose ends. And this is probably a point to get into, is I forgot the first time that they were on Raxus Prime, they mentioned the Core.
The Core.
Which is the Old Republic's AI that governs the planet's traffic and how it shuffles its recycling, maintenance, and everything like that. It's completely artificially intelligent.
Yes.
And it runs the planet. It didn't really matter for the first part because all it does is just occasionally send out PSAs to announce what it's doing to the planet for some reason. And it comes up now.
Yes.
It comes back. Proxy attacks Juno. And then we jump perspective back to Starkiller. Starkiller unwittingly carries on, cutting his way to the cannon. Horrified by his own efficacy for the first time, he realizes the true strength of the Sith is fear, not in power, because fear prevents the need for lethal force, because if he proceeded like this all the time, he'd just cut his way to the extinction of everybody. Fear is actually a better governing force, and he figures this out finally. He reaches the cannon by destroying everybody in front of him, and successfully reprograms it to fire the cannon into the structure, not the magnetic ore receivers, receive the ore and repurpose it. So he very easily destroys this massive, expensive structure.
And then brings the Star Destroyer down.
Yeah.
With the Force. He calls upon Galen.
Well, yeah. So it comes down to him. Somehow the shipyard blows up around the Star Destroyer, and then it zooms down at him. In the cutscene, it's really funny because it's like, woo! Really fast. In this, it's much slower. And this is the fight that I had a huge issue with in the game.
So did I, because it glitched out on me 3 times.
Oh, I have an issue with this part. Whatever. He does a Yoda thing, though, and he brings the entire Star Destroyer down with the Force.
In a controlled descent.
Yeah, to basically wipe out the cannon at its base on top of everything else. It's an interesting moment, but I was so scarred by the game's poor mechanics that I just don't care.
I had played the game at this point. I had played that far into the game.
So, did you like it? Did you like the scene?
Yeah, I thought it was very well written.
I wish the game had been as straightforward as it was. It's not bad, I just hate the game's part. So anyway, he wins because of course he does, and then he radios for evac, and Coda answers and says that sorry, but Proxy and Juno can't help right now. He refuses to be specific and leaves Starkiller basically on his own. So Coda tells him to go out and reach out, grab the Star Destroyer, rip it down, blah blah blah, and the explosion and the storm of the Force is so powerful that it actually wakes Juno up on the ship.
Because the ship is bucking
on a tidal wave of trash.
Yeah, quote the book.
Yeah, and that's when we know that she got attacked by Proxy for sure, because she's damaged from it. We also learn that Proxy has gone completely rogue and that he scuttled out of the ship. In doing so, he also grounded the Rogue Shadow by changing its launch codes. So they're stuck. Coda fears that Proxy might be an Imperial plant, not knowing the irony of that statement. So Starkiller goes after the droid, because otherwise they're not leaving Raxus Prime. Chapter 31, Starkiller is hurt by Proxy's betrayal and furious with the core, which he assumes must have instigated this change because it's an AI, and he follows Proxy's homing beacon. Good thing the AI forgot to turn that off. And he finds Proxy at the core with cables in his back. And the core announces that Proxy's personality module has been completely supplanted and, in essence, has killed Proxy, with his body being repurposed. The core, however, desires more. In fact, it wants to take over the galaxy.
It wants to supplant the Emperor.
This is why AI is illegal in the Mass Effect universe. Then there's a similar fight in the game where Proxy flips through different Jedi and Sith modules to challenge him, but ultimately he's no match for the Force. Starkiller defeats him and
destroys the core.
Destroys the core. This is like hugely different from the game.
Absolutely.
Where the game, you just fight. Proxy just shows up. And in this, it's more of this AI thing, but it's kind of a shame that they glossed over it so quickly. Because they could have gone much farther. I like this presentation of this conflict much more than the games.
Yeah, because the game, he just shows up and says, I calculated this would be the best time to ambush you. And then you fight him, and then he says his programming's been deleted.
Yeah, and something actually messed with him. There's some external stuff that they didn't count on. It's a better story. But yeah, he uses Sith lightning to basically fry the core's central computer processor, while it screams impotently at him. Somehow Proxy survives all the Sith lightning that goes on for several minutes.
Yeah.
According to the book. Proxy survives, but his primary programming has been erased. Finally, they can be friends.
Yay! That ends part 2.
Yep. Part 3 is called Rebel. No more puns. Just straightforward. Rogue Shadow lands on Rumamul, a desert planet where they're flying low and waiting for orders from, I guess, this nascent rebellion. They're waiting for the 3 main senators to get into line and meet up. Vader pays another call, and this time Starkiller asks Juno to observe. He tells Vader that it's way too dangerous to contact him and to back off, basically. Yeah, wait. And Vader's not happy about that. Shortly after their call to Corellia comes to meet some of the rebels. And he has to promise Juno that he knows what he's doing the right thing. At Corellia, Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, and Leia, and the Corellian ambassador declare rebellion is formed in this very Declaration of Independence moment, predicated on Starkiller's example of standing up for the rights of others. Again, not knowing the irony of what it is they're talking about. And then Star Destroyers appear in orbit, and Stormtroopers arrive, and the fighting begins.
That's 33.
Yeah. There's nothing else going on 32. Let's just jump forward.
You didn't throw that break in there.
Oh, yeah, those are 2 separate chapters. The one thing of note in Chapter 33 is that Starkiller here considers using the rebellion for his own ends.
Yes.
Maybe he and Juno can rule a galaxy. It doesn't come to anything. It's not at all mentioned in the game. I thought it was kind of interesting that it's still that Sith attitude of, like, power hungry, but it doesn't come to anything. Because, wait, I have Chapter 33 and then Chapter 33 again. Well, whatever. Vader arrives in one of those 2.
34.
Is it?
Yep, because it's like a page long.
No, maybe that's what the issue was. Yeah, Vader arrives, orders his forces to take everyone alive. Coda rushes him, but is swiftly force-choked, apparently to death. Vader throws a table at Starkiller after calling him his apprentice, and then knocks him outside and into the snow, and marches after him. Proxy urges Juno to run away so they can help him. Starkiller is still alive outside. He confronts Vader. Vader tells him that it was all a lie, and that he was just a tool, and then he tosses Starkiller off the cliff. But Starkiller clings to it for dear life, and Vader moves in to finish him off, but then Proxy jumps on him, attacks him as Obi-Wan, gives Vader a little bit of a moment of pause, seeing his old master there. You're supposed to be the chosen one. You are my brother.
You are the chosen one!
Don't do it, Anakin. I have the high ground.
We never speak of those movies.
Vader wastes no time in chopping Proxy in half.
No.
It's clean.
In the game, he just stabs him.
Didn't need to be its own chapter, though. This whole section could have been just combined into like one 10-15 page long chapter for more effect.
Yep.
In 36, Juno returns to orbit in the Rogue Shadow, and then after things appear to have calmed down and become safe, she goes back down, and she sees Proxy's dissected body lying in the snow. She investigates it and is led eventually by blood trail or something to Starkiller's body, boot prints, I think, to Starkiller's body on the rocks below.
No, it was a blood trail.
Was it?
Yep, because the wash of the engines blows the freshly fallen snow.
Right. Well, anyway, she finds him still barely alive. She rescues him. Starkiller mumbles that his real name is Galen.
I'm here to rescue you.
Yeah, pretty much. His real name is Galen, implying he's finally free, if that's what he wants to be called from now on. And he decides to have her land at the cliff top to retrieve his saber. I thought they were going to get Proxy's body, but apparently it's just good enough to dump him in the snow.
Yeah.
But he does go to his saber. Angry and betrayed, they search for a target for when Vader, or basically they're looking for where Vader went.
Yep.
They have no idea where he went. So Starkiller tries to meditate the Jedi way and to try to catch a glimpse of the future. He sees a massive space station, that's no moon, in the Horus system, but he's not sure how it will end. I noticed something with Chapter 37. It's something that comes up in the Halo books all the time. I went back and I could not find very many examples of this. It just says Horus system. It just tells you what system they're in. It doesn't do that every chapter. It's irregular. Even sometimes when they're in a new system, it doesn't do that. It does do it in Chapter 33, where it says hyperspace, stars, atmosphere, none of which makes sense together. But it doesn't do it very often where they give you like its own little paragraph lead, where they do in the Halo books all the time. They give you the date. Weird, right?
Yeah.
It would be one thing if it was consistent, but it's not consistent.
I honestly hadn't even noticed it.
Yeah, because it's weird, not consistent. I don't know. Rewrites in the book, maybe?
Maybe.
It only comes up 3 or 4 times. Anyway, so they go to the Hura system.
Where they find the Death Star.
Mm-hmm. And they finally answer the mystery of where did all those Wookiees go. That's how they feel about the situation, too. Starkiller sorts through his vision of the Death Star as he cleans his saber. And is this the first time it becomes the Aqua Saber?
Yes.
Okay, so he changes the color by putting in the crystal that he found in his dad's hut, and it becomes an Aqua Saber.
Aqua Saber, that sounds like a terrible aftershave.
I was just thinking, like, that sounds like some poorly product-placed DC garbage. So he's very confused by the visions and his own changing identity. He continues to meditate until they arrive in Horus. The Death Star, they find, is guarded by 6 Star Destroyers and dozens of TIE Fighter squadrons, so it's a really good thing that the Rogue Shadow is a stealth ship. And they fly in carefully, and Juno is able to bring him to within the atmosphere field that surrounds the Death Star, apparently for the Wookiees to breathe. Seems like it would be less energy intensive just to buy spacesuits for them, but the Empire doesn't do anything with subtlety.
No.
Atmosphere field it is. No longer able to fly him any closer. They have a kiss!
And then he jumps.
And then he jumps down to kill the Death Star, which makes him the Death Star killer. Oh, also the Death Star is orbiting the planet Despair.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Despayre. Planet Despair.
Yeah, the planet Despair.
Planet Despair. Nothing with subtlety.
Nope.
And that leads us to the last real chapter of the book. Also, I think the longest chapter of the book.
I believe so,
Chapter 38, which read like one of the shortest chapters of the book because there's not a lot of meat to this thing.
Nope.
Starkiller lands on the Death Star and stealths his way along until he sees an opportunity to free some Wookiee slaves and cause some mayhem, which he's really good at. From the remains, he gathers 4 Wookiees to help him find the senators. They run into some Star Troopers, but I skipped it because it wasn't important.
2 of them die.
The Wookiees lead him to an access way, and Starkiller proceeds alone from there, cutting his way up into access pipes from which they lead to the Death Star's main laser array, blah, 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 firing tubes and whatever, lasers.
The Wookiee part was not in the game.
No, it wasn't. No, it was much simpler.
You dove off the ship, and suddenly you're in the laser tubes.
Yeah. Stepping aside from the summary, did you have a hard time reading the first half of this chapter? I just didn't follow it. It was really difficult to describe. It's like I was having a hard time tracking on the page, just because what was happening seemed to have so little gravity.
Yeah, it didn't seem to have much to do with the rest of the book.
At some point, he gets attacked by AT-ATs.
Yep.
And dispatches them in like a sentence.
Yep.
What? Why is this happening? Just get to the point.
Yeah.
It was bizarre. I've never had that. I can't remember a conscious time of having that issue where I was just like reading and I was like, what does this even say? The writing has just drops quality substantially. And I almost wonder if they told the writer to go back and beef that section up.
Maybe.
To make the book a little longer or something.
Maybe.
Because it just has no weight at all.
Nope.
But anyway, eventually he makes his way up to the Emperor's observation chamber or something and follows Palpatine's voice. And he sees the hostages, the senators, and Coda, still alive. Look at that. The Emperor and Vader. The Emperor orders Vader to deal with Starkiller. Vader attacks with full ferocity, and an all-out saber and force duel ensues. Probably the best saber combat in the book.
Yep. I would agree with
really
that.
Really well written. There's a lot of emotional depth to it, too, because the apprentice is realizing he's no longer the apprentice.
Yep.
He's Galen. Also, he kind of has this moment of like, you're not my dad! Like Vader's his stepdad or something.
You're not my real dad!
He overcomes Vader and then batters him nearly to death, but he leaves him because before Starkiller can kill him, the Emperor is like, yes, yes, let the hate flow through you. Kill him, become my apprentice. Blah. They realize that they don't want to do that. We do get a little bit like the Emperor trying to force persuade and like dominate his mind, but before he can succeed in overcoming Galen or Starkiller, Coda attacks him by pulling the Emperor's lightsaber off his belt, and the Emperor hits him with Force Lightning, forces Galen to step into the middle of it, and they fight a little bit. Not as much as they fight in the game, though.
Nope.
That fight was hilarious, where the Emperor like skitters back and forth. It was it's like he's moving at 3 times speed or something. It just didn't look right. So the Emperor forces Starkiller to basically take a stand here. Be a Jedi and save his buddies, or, become his apprentice. And let the senators all die. And he
let
steps
the hate
up to
flow
the
through him.
Yeah. So he literally is what he chooses. He lets the Emperor's hate flow through him.
Yes.
Starkiller steps up to become a martyr, which allows Coda, the senators, to escape when Juno apparently shows up with a rogue shadow. That came out of the blue, right? How did she even get it close enough to the observation chamber?
I don't know.
Whatever. Starkiller dies at Darth Vader and the Emperor's heels. Rebels escape. Very rushed, sudden ending. Something was off about this chapter. I don't know why. I don't get the Jedi code that says don't kill the big bad guy that will continue to abuse the galaxy forever.
I don't know. I don't understand it either.
It's a weakness. It's a weakness in the canon overall.
Epilogue.
Back on Kashyyyk again, because we backtrack. Juno is sad. Bail Organa, among the other rebels, are gathered there, blah, blah, blah. They announce Starkiller's name is Galen Marrok, son of Kento. Coda tells Juno the reason that she helped him, even though he was suspicious. Because she was the bright light at the center of his soul. His love for her.
Dun, da, da, da. Anyway, they rally behind his family crest, and that's the end.
Yeah.
That's the end of the book.
And then it's time to steal the Death Star plans. Back from Galen or so. He's the guy that designed the Death Star. What do you think? Did it successfully expand on the game or not?
I thought it did. Personally, it expanded the side characters a lot more, and it gave those characters depth, whereas the game did not.
All of that is true.
The plot summary portion of the book made the book a boring read.
Yeah.
However, when they were going into stuff that the book didn't cover, or the game didn't cover, the book became much better. Like towards the end, after 22, the quality of the writing stepped up a lot. Everything went into such a greater detail. I personally believe that this book adds to the game. I mean, what are your thoughts?
The first half of the book is nothing more than just a summary, and it's not fun to read.
I will concede that point. Yeah. I do agree with you there.
It's hard. The second half of the book, though, is a pretty solid improvement, but it still struggles to get around the story's established pace of and then. If somebody was interested in playing the game, I think I'd put the book in their hand instead. I'd say that the book is better than the game. So if we get down to brass tacks about the central question here, does it expand meaningfully on the game? Based on what you just said, I might have said no before we started talking, but I guess, yeah, it expands expands on the game because it takes what is a really skin and bones plot and does
the game is very shallow, but the book deepens it a lot.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Yeah, I suppose it achieves its goal of expanding on the story, but I would say I still feel like the book itself is unnecessary. If you had to experience the Force Unleashed, I think the best way to go would be to read the book. Like one is obsolete, one or the other, either the gameplay or the extra narrative. I don't know, something about it is just off on the scale of what's worth it here, and it's hard for me to appropriate which one I think is better. My notes say there's just not enough that's really expanded or different between the game and the book, but I guess I didn't really consider the emotional dimension. I will say Rogue One's story was better. Yeah, I guess I didn't expect this coming into the episode, but yeah, I guess so. That it does meaningfully expand on the story.
So
particularly with Juno.
So I actually changed your mind on a book.
Yeah, I think you did.
Holy crap.
I don't think it's a good book.
No.
But you changed my opinion on whether or not it is.
It gainfully adds to
the
actual game itself.
Yeah, it fails on a lot of fronts. Like, it fails to ultimately live up to its premise because it's no longer canon, right? It fails to set a good pace. It's stuck on video game summary mode, but it does achieve expanding that bare bones plot in a way that resonates better.
I agree. So our next book is going to be Elite Dangerous Legacy
by Michael Brooks.
Michael Brooks.
This is the one that we were joking about at the beginning of the episode that was $86? $84 for a hardback copy from Amazon. So if you want to read along with us, which we always encourage you to do, either get it from the library if you can, or go buy the $8 version from Kindle, or wherever the audiobooks are sold. It was $7.99 on Kindle for us. We didn't realize that going in. It was my choice, and I didn't think to double check. Oh, did you find a new used copy?
No. The title is actually Elite Legacy.
Elite Legacy, okay.
Not Elite Dangerous Legacy.
Gotcha.
By Michael Brooks. It is an Elite Dangerous novel.
And this is one of the ones that was listed on Frontier's website, so it's an official licensed novel. And then after that, we're doing Halo: The Fall of Reach, paired with Halo Reach, the video game, and then Ready Player One.
Yeah, Ready Player One to be released a couple months afterward.
So we are officially halfway through the season then.
Yes, we are.
In the meantime, we've got our other podcast, the Dungeons & Dragons Diecast.
Yes.
That's been going on.
I would suggest you listen to that if you enjoy listening to overpowered characters slaughtering people.
So hopefully you'll get a chance to read Elite Dangerous. We're going to play the game, but the structure of the episode is going to be a little bit different because Elite doesn't have the same linear story that these other games have. So it's going to be more of a discussion of the mechanics. And
yeah, it'll be a lot different, and it'll be easier to kind of discuss, because we're not discussing a plot.
We're discussing mechanics in the universe.
Yep.
So look forward to that in 2 weeks. There should be a diecast that goes up next week from whenever you're listening to this. And do us a favor, we haven't asked yet. Leave us a review, whether or not you like us or not. 5 stars would be nice, appreciated. 1 star if you think that we're not Star Wars fans enough for you. But we thrive from feedback. We grow from feedback.
Yes. Even if you leave a 1 star, please actually put feedback in there so that we know how we can improve.
Yeah.
A podcast like this only grows and improves with fan feedback.
And you sharing it. We're not asking for cash. We're asking for
listeners.
Listeners, yeah.
All right. Thank you for listening to Canon Fodder Podcast. I have been Kyle Newcomb.
I am still Travis Knight.
And we hope you listen to the next episode.